Good evening. My name is Melissa Williams, and I serve as the president of the Washington County Board of Education. Welcome to the members of the Board of Education, the superintendent, staff, and the community to the Board of Education's public business meeting. Everyone is participating in this meeting using a telephone or an electronic device. By way of background, it has always been the practice of the Washington County Board of Education to meet in person and to invite members of the public to the board's meetings. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, certain legal directives, and the need to safeguard the health of our community, it is necessary to participate in this public meeting by phone or an electronic device. Today's business meeting will be recorded, and the public may access the public meeting now on Channel 99, Facebook, and on the WCPS website. The public comment portion of today's meeting will not take place. The Board of Education encourages the public to submit their comments in writing to boe@wcps.k12.md.us, and this information will be distributed to board members and the superintendent. At this time, I call to order this public business meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. Dr. Pugh, would you please call the roll so that we may determine if we have a quorum of members present?
Sure. Mr. Bickford?
Here.
Mrs. Fisher? Here. Mr. Geffsford?
Present.
Mrs. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Ridenhour?
Here.
Mr. Stauffer?
Here.
Mrs. Williams?
Here.
And Mr. Boko?
Here.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. We have all members and our student board member present, so we do have a quorum. At this time, I'd like to call upon our student board member, Kevin Bokum, who is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. Kevin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, and welcome. Kevin is our new student member of the board. Kevin is a junior at North Hagerstown High School, and tonight begins his 12-month term. We're happy to have you with us this evening, Kevin. We'll move now to approval of this evening's agenda. Is there a motion?
This is Peter. I move for approval of the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
This is Mrs. Fisher. I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there any discussion? Hearing none?
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
I'd like to amend the agenda.
Okay, sir. Can you tell me more about your amendment, please?
Yes, I'd like to have a conversation concerning the opening of the schools. I think, and I'm sorry, I do apologize for not having notes. I don't know if one of the other board members might be able to help me out on the conversation concerning having just a discussion about the opening and maybe vote on that this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gessford. So I'm understanding that you wish to offer an amendment to the agenda.
Yes.
And I would like to suggest that we add an item under new business which would make that item number 2 under new business. And I'm suggesting for your motion, Mr. Gesford, that this item be a discussion and determination of the instructional model for the return to school beginning on August 31st, 2020. Does that sound like what you
That's-
want for your
that's-
amendment?
That's perfect, Mrs. Williams.
Thank you. Is there a second to Mr. Gesford's amendment?
This is Mrs. Murray. I second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on Mrs. Murray's amendment? Or on Mrs. Murray's, oh geez, excuse me. Is there any discussion on Mr. Gesford's motion to amend the agenda? Okay, hearing none, the vote then is on the amendment to the agenda, which is a new item of new business, discussion and determination of the instructional model for the return to school beginning on August 31st, 2020. Dr. Pugh, would you please call the roll for the vote on the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
and Mr. Bocum.
Aye.
Motion carries. So we have approval of the amendment. We'll vote on the agenda as amended. Is there a motion?
Madam
This is
President, I
Mr.
move
Bickford.
to, go ahead, Peter.
Same thing. This is Mr. Bickford. I move to approve the amended agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any discussion on the amended agenda? Dr. Pugh, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
and Mr. Bocum.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We have a unanimous vote with the student member concurring. So we have approval of an amended agenda for this evening. This time we'll move to approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mrs. Williams, I do have motions here. Unfortunately, my computer was having difficulty getting unmuted. So the first motion I will have is the approval of the work session minutes dated Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there a second to Mr. Gesford's motion?
This is
Mrs.
Mrs. Murray. I
Fisher,
second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there any discussion, any additions or corrections to the minutes of the work session of June 23rd, 2020? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote. Dr. Pugh?
Yes, Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bocum,
Aye.
and Mrs. Fisher.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a unanimous approval of the work session minutes dated June 23rd, 2020. Mr. Gesford, do you have another motion?
Yes, Mrs. Williams, the second motion is the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the closed session dated June 23rd, 2020? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the vote. Dr. Pugh, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
and Mrs. Williams.
Aye. So we have unanimous approval of the closed session minutes of June 23rd, 2020. Mr. Gesser, do you have another motion?
Yes, Mrs. Williams, I do. The third motion and final motion would be the approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gesser. Is there a second to Mr. Gesser's motion?
Second,
Mr. Bickford seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Are there any additions or corrections to the business meeting minutes of June 23rd, 2020? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote. Dr. Pugh, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
and Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
He just went out again.
Okay, we have unanimous approval of the business meeting minutes of June 23rd, 2020. This time we'll move to public comment. There is no public comment portion to this meeting. However, the Board of Education encourages the public to submit their comments in writing to boe@wcps.k12.md.us. It's usually at this point in the meeting where there is board member response to public comment, and I would like to take the opportunity to thank the many members of our community who have sent emails expressing their concerns, asking questions, and voicing their opinions regarding the start of the 2020-2021 school year. Each email that was received was read and played a part in the board's decision-making process. We have no old business to conduct this evening, so we'll move directly to new business. And our first item of new business is the consideration of a consent agenda with Mr. Scott Bechtel, Supervisor of Purchasing, presenting. Mr. Bechtel, are you there?
I am. Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. Tonight, I have 3 items for your review. These items were reviewed by our purchasing committee and are being recommended for approval. And staff is available if you have any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bechtel. Is there a motion?
This is Mr. Bickford. Madam President, I move to approve the awards, renewals, and procurements for electronic reading inventory testing to Houghton Mifflin Harcourt at a cost of $293,600. Dible's 8 assessment system to Amplify at a cost of $88,311.40. And professional design services HVAC and roof replacement at Smithsburg High School to Kybart Inc. at a cost of $321,925.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second to Mr. Bickford's motion?
This is Mrs.
Second.
Murray. I second.
I heard you, Mr. Ridenhour, for the second. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Bechtel or any discussion of the consent agenda? Okay, then we'll move to the vote.
Mrs.
Oh,
Williams?
yes.
Jackie had a question.
I have my
Yes.
hand. The third item, the roof replacement for Smithsburg High School. Are there any significant changes being made to the roof? And also it includes an HVAC system. Is that system going to be very different from what is there now? I'm asking these questions because it just seems to me like almost $322,000 is a lot just for design services if these items are not being changed at all.
Mrs. Williams, this is Mr. Prue. I believe I can answer Mrs. Fisher's question. I don't believe there are any significant anticipated changes. As you do know, though, the Smithsburg HVAC system is original to the building circa roughly 1966-67. So it is in excess of a 50-year-old system, and it is a unique system in terms of how the air exchanges are done within that building. The design also then includes the roof replacement within that building. So this is a twofold design for two significant capital improvement projects. The cost is slightly higher than what we may have anticipated, but it is within the realm of what the expected cost is for the capital expenditures.
And just to add, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just still think it's a lot of money if they're not changing the design, they're just replacing those two, but thank you for your explanation.
And I would, this is Mr. Bakewell, I would just add that, you know, the bids did come in. We got 6 bids and 4 of them were all within about $25,000 of the low bid. And then we had 2 kind of outliers that were a little higher. So that typically tells me that, you know, the cost is, you know, market cost when we have bids in that, so many bids in such a tight window.
Thank you.
Colleagues, I'm unable to see raised hands on my computer screen at this moment, so I'm asking you just to speak up if you have a question or comment.
Mrs. Williams, this is Mrs. Murray. I just had a statement. I just wanted to let the listening public know that the electronic reading inventory and the DIBELS 8 assessment were both renewals. It's materials that we have used in the past and we are just renewing them. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there any further discussion or any additional questions? Okay, Dr. Pugh, if you would, please call the roll for the vote.
Yes, Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer, Mrs. Williams,
Mr. Stauffer, are you there?
Yes, my computer wasn't working. I said aye, but it muted.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
and Mr. Bokum.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
This evening's consent agenda is approved unanimously with the student member concurring. Thank you. At this time, we'll move to item number 2 under new business, which is a discussion and determination of the instructional model for the return to school beginning on August 31st, 2020. Colleagues, as I mentioned, I'm not able to see raised hands, so I'm asking that you just speak up if there's something that you wish to say during the discussion, and I'm asking that each person takes one turn before offering a second comment or a second question so that everyone is able to participate equally. Does that sound agreeable?
It does. I just have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we making a motion and then discussing, or are we discussing and making a motion?
I am entertaining a motion.
Okay, then I will make a motion. President Williams, based on the continuing COVID-19 pandemic and the serious health risks associated with said pandemic, and for the safety of all WCPS students, I move to adopt a model of full distance learning for Washington County Public Schools beginning August 31st, 2020, and continuing until it is safe for students to physically return to school, and authorize the superintendent to develop and implement the operational plans to support this model.
Thank you for the motion, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Mrs. Fisher, I second.
Thank you. And we'll open discussion. And Mrs. Murray, since you were the person who made the motion, would you like to begin the discussion?
Certainly, I'm very much in favor of this because of the unpredictableness, if that's a word, of COVID-19, of the pandemic, and what we don't know about it. So I am in favor of this distance learning model for the start of school. And I just trust that the superintendent and his staff will work to make it the best that it can be.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray.
This is Mrs. Fisher. I'm for the proposal, and I'd like to answer a argument I sometimes hear from the other side, which is that hardly any kids seem to get COVID. Well, that's not exactly true. There are kids that get COVID, and there have been children that have died from COVID. But due to the fact that school closures occurred in March, which was relatively early in this horrible virus that has struck our country and the world, that those children were the least exposed of any group, because from March, they were no longer in school. They were, for the most part, at home, and shortly thereafter, most school systems began to do in the distance learning. So those children were the fastest and most quarantined group of people. Also, in addition to that, along with the argument I often hear that, well, the flu kills lots of people. According to the CDC, United States flu deaths average 20,000 annually. COVID had 133,420 6 months in. So for the reasons of the health of our students and other people that can be infected if we open school, I am in favor of this move.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher.
Mrs. Williams, this is Guestford.
Yes,
I have
Mr.
a
Guest.
question for the superintendent. Dr. Michaels, typically what would a day look like? I mean, I'm sure you've already planned some of this out because we're only a few months away from opening, but what would a typical day look like from the very beginning of a student walking to the school bus and then returning home on a school bus? Do you have any kind of idea of what that would look like for a parent that has concerns?
Mr. Guestford, you're asking if we return to school in person?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think we were still in the process and still are in the process, because regardless of how the board votes this evening, there's certainly an opportunity that we might return sometime, either to phase in plan or in full, but still might want to, slowly walk that in. But I would anticipate if we return in August, it probably would not be 100% of the students. It would be some portion of the students. It'd be some hybrid model similar to what most people have heard across the state, an A-Day, B-Day, or AA, BB Day, or depending upon how large groups that we might have. I think parents could anticipate we'd expect to see children at the bus stop with masks, get on the bus. The bus driver would ensure a child would have a mask. Students would be seated one to a seat on a bus at maximum, and/or could sit together as a family if there were family members who were youth that all lived in the same household, regardless of their relationship. They all lived in the same household. They could sit in the same seat. They'd arrive at school. We would work to keep students in small groups, and move them into their classrooms. They would be taught in their classrooms as much as possible. We would move teachers more than we would move students, but that would not always be possible. We would probably have to eat lunch in the classroom, and only maybe a fraction of the students in the cafeteria or other types of areas. When we're outside, if we're distant, students could remove their masks, teachers could remove their masks. We were outside and had a substantial amount of distance between students. So, I mean, beyond that, it would pretty much look like a normal day. I'm not sure what else to share. I mean, when we go home, we'd have masks on. We get off the bus. At that point, we'd expect children to have masks on, the bus driver have a mask on, all staff members to have masks on.
Will we be taking temperatures of students and staff?
We originally thought that we'd have to, and we do have 420 thermometers on hand, and we've ordered more. At the guidance of the health department at this point, they do not recommend taking temperatures because the majority of particularly students are asymptomatic. So it's certainly possible that they have COVID-19, but would not exhibit it. So that would not be a guarantee that we're letting children in, that do not or do have COVID-19 by simply taking the temperature. So after long discussions with the health department, initially we were going to be taking temperatures of everyone. At this point, that's not their recommendation.
I have a few more questions, but I'll let my other board members go.
Thank you, Mr. Gessford.
Mr. Stauffer, Dr. Michael, I hope the listening audience realizes that these decisions are very tough ones to make. And it's not going to be the same as going back face to face. What thoughts have you and your staff given to, excuse me, how we will handle certain unique situations like the Marshall Street students? Well, let's start with that.
Well, I can say that as of yesterday, we started our ESY program, our extended school year program. Not all students that are involved in that program, primarily special ed children, are electing to attend at this point. We do have some of them working virtually. I was at Lincolnshire today, and E. Russell Hicks, I must say, for the staff and the students, I must commend them for the work that they're doing. The students appear to be right back as if they always were, except wearing masks. For some of those children, they were challenged to wear the mask. Staff did a great job working with the children, trying to encourage them to keep their mask on or not fidget with their mask. Staff obviously all had their mask on. Again, I want to commend the staff that I saw. I didn't get to Marshall Street today. We do have 3 other locations that have extended year summer school going on right now in person with a portion of our children. But I do want to commend staff and students who are cooperating and working. Now, again, most of these classrooms have 3, 4 children in. Sometimes there's as many adults as there are children. So they're not even classes of 15. So they're fairly small classes, and they're not our most fragile children. Again, I didn't make it to Marshall Street. Distance learning is a challenge with some of our children that require a great deal of, working with their dexterity and helping them walk and a lot of motor skill and development types things. So that would be challenging with distance learning, much like it was in the spring. But obviously, if that's the direction we go, we certainly would do the very, very best we could to meet everyone's needs virtually. I don't know if that answers your question, Mr. Stauffer. It's obviously, we have a full committee that's working on Life Skills Summit and children with cognitive or physical disabilities, solely dedicated. We have a complete committee solely dedicated to focusing on how we would address the needs of those children, regardless of the structure of the day.
Is there anyone else?
If I may, this is Wayne.
Mr. Ridenour, yes, go
Okay,
ahead.
I'll make sure I was connected.
We can hear
Look,
you.
this is very difficult for everybody. Everybody around the county is going to have a different opinion. I've been involved in public education for going on 50 years. Not that that makes a big difference, but this is the scariest thing that I think our kids have dealt with. And we've dealt with some weird things in the last 10 years. But this virus is incredibly viral, and it's incredibly contagious. And it doesn't matter how well, and our guys are, all of our staff are working their brains out to try to make it possible for us to go face to face with our students. But we can't. There are too many holes in whatever idea that I've read. I can find holes in the rationale that scare me. And I'm not just worried about the kids. All of us are worried about the kids, but we have a large contingent of staff who are very vulnerable, and that worries me equally. So that I just don't see how at this point in time, and it may be longer than we anticipate, unless we get somehow get a cure to this sometime in the near future. So I am in support of virtual and electronic distance learning. I think I have confidence in our teachers and staff that we can put something together that will do a decent job or do a good job with our kids and not allow them to fall through the cracks. So I am in support of this. Await to see exactly how we're going to do it. And I challenge all of our people to do the best that we can in a very, very difficult situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour.
Mrs. Williams, I have a couple more questions. If none of my colleagues have any more, I'd like to ask a couple more.
Go ahead, Mr. Gessford.
This question would be on the liability. If we were to have multiple either students or staff become ill, what is our liability for that if something tragic would happen? And we've actually opened the schools back up. And then on the second part of that, we know that the HIPAA is very, very important in this day and age. And I'd like to know how that would fit into this program also of not being able to tell other staff members or parents of students that have the COVID. And that may kind of fall into the liability of our responsibility. So what do we do there?
Mr. Gessford, I might have to ask Mr. Monterano to respond to that. I would think our liability would be the same as it is with other circumstances. If we neglect in any way, fail to do best practices or to follow appropriate protocols, things like that, I think we put ourselves at great risk. I think if we knowingly do something, obviously we'd be liable. I think if we failed to, if we required things and we failed to enforce the requirement of those things, I think we'd put ourselves at risk. But at this point, Mr. Monterano, maybe you could, probably as the lawyer, you'd be better to respond to that than me, the non-lawyer.
Yes, Mr. Gessford, this is John Monterano. I would agree with Dr. Michael. I think that if we would go back and we would send our students back to school, I mean, we would take all reasonable and beyond reasonable precautions. We would follow all the procedures and all the CDC requirements that were there. I believe if you do that, and again, you don't do anything intentionally or willingly, I think the liability would be limited from a legal standpoint. So, and we've been obviously talking through all those procedures, and anything that we would do relating to the opening of schools would would be based around those procedures and processes. And so I think from a liability perspective, I think we would be okay. Again, unless there was something intentional or we didn't follow our own processes and procedures, I think that's when you get yourself into trouble. But I think that would be okay.
Anything, John, on the HIPAA piece or whatever? I think we would, as we were aware of anybody with COVID, regardless, again, when this occurs, we'd have a requirement to report to the nurse's office, which would still be covered. The health department, which still should be covered. And then we take their guidance as far as someone being allowed to participate in school. I'm not sure if you can add anything else to that.
No, I would just say that, I mean, HIPAA is there, and we would have to follow that just like we'd have to follow with any other medical condition or medical situation that would arise relating to one of our students or one of our staff. So we'd still be governed by all the HIPAA requirements, and we would follow those as we do with any other medical situation. Do we think that we can control our smallest students by keeping their mask on? I know that we can talk to our high schoolers, and I think, you know, in most cases, most of them would do that. But I'm sure there's some parents out there that don't believe in this and say that's foolish. You can go to school without a mask. How do we deal with that type of situation?
It's a little unclear to me from the state whether you can actually require a staff member or a student to wear a mask. I've heard two different things. Superintendents, as the superintendent's group, we're trying to get clarity on that. I think for younger children, I think the expectation will be pretty challenging for a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old to understand that they need to wear the mask, to not fidget with their mask, not touch their mask. Quite obviously, there's children that young in the hospital that have to wear a mask or have to wear a mask to see other people or whatever, but maybe not for an extended period of time. But it definitely would be a challenge.
I know that we have a lot of high-risk staff. I mean, I'm sure we have our female staff that have some pregnancies coming up. I think we have some older staff that typically have some have medical issues that would require, you know, being very cautious around this disease until we can find some type of vaccination. But I think, you know, concerning, I know our parents or our teachers go so far beyond their call of duty, taking papers home and grading them. I think, you know, we don't know if that could be transported to their home, if they're taking items from work home that could get back into their families, and then we find out that family's, you know, got issues with COVID. Then we become a teacher shortage because we already know that we have subbing issues every year. We always seem to have a rough time with that. So I guess, you know, I've been really concerned about opening school up and how this is going to happen. Like all of our board members, we've all been inundated with emails. I know I've spoke to quite a few people, had questions. I guess I'm going to have to vote I vote that we don't open schools until we have a little bit more enlightenment on this progressive disease, and hopefully that our school system could maybe look at way to step in the students where not everybody's going at one time, and maybe over after the first marking period, we could bring maybe 1 or 2 classes back and see how that works, because it just seems like there's so many unanswered questions and on both sides, and I can't see how it's just a superintendent's responsibility, staff's responsibility. I think it's all our responsibility to look after the safety of our children. And I don't have a child in there. I do have grandchildren that I'm concerned about, and I would want them to be safe. And at this time, with it having so many unanswered questions, I think I'm just going to have to
agree with my colleagues and vote no, not to open schools, with students in the classroom that just go with the digital learning, virtual learning through computers. So I will be voting no.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there anyone else?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Stauffer. Mr. Stauffer, you need to unmute.
I was on mute. My computer keeps jerking it back to mute. Dr. Michael, I know your staff's been working for a while in the so-called war room at CES. What types of ideas have been tossed about so far to lessen the impact of virtual learning on farm students, families, whether it's one parent and maybe a couple elementary children and so forth? We can't lose them. What ideas have been tossed about to try to alleviate that?
Well, I can say right now, because we're trying to work on 3 and 4 different possibilities for the first day of school, we're kind of divided. We have our attention divided multiple different ways. I can say we have, I think it's 23 easels set up in what we're describing as the war room, for lack of any better term. I guess the war on COVID-19. On one of those chart papers, I think it's been pulled off the easel, because on top of the easels, we have papers all over the whole walls. We need a bigger room at this point, and we're in a pretty large room to begin with. We have a list of students that would be our highest priority to make certain that they came to school, or possible came to school every day, or came back to school first, depending upon how those circumstances would be. We have children listed like our homeless population, children that don't have access to the internet, our farm population, our English language learner population, our special needs population. So a variety of students like that, we would place high priority on trying to getting back into the school setting, regardless whether that's August 31st or January 1st or next September, or whenever that turns out to be. On top of that, if we were doing distance learning, we have gone to great extents to purchase different additional pucks. The unfortunate part with a puck right now, puck being a hotspot that would provide internet services for children that don't have internet, they are about $500, because right now we're having to buy the entire service. So we have been trying to work with Antietam Cable, some other carriers, if there's a possibility of getting cable to some of those areas. We have purchased hotspots that go on a bus, where we could take a bus into a community, maybe that has a weak signal or does not have, children don't have internet service, so we'd be able to provide internet service through those types of devices. I'm sure everybody by now has seen our Wi-Fi spot here signs at the various schools, a yellow sign. We've strategically placed them where there's an outside service that helps pick that up. We would have to, again, very much target, visiting those homes in a safe manner, contacting those parents, contacting those children if all possible, encourage them to participate, again, by technology if capable, or through work packets if necessary. Quite obviously, I'm very concerned about our at-risk population, and a lot of children will be in circumstances that won't have the ideal learning environment. I've even had some surprises from people that thought their children were working, only to find out as their grades started to show up that their children were on their computer, but they weren't working on schoolwork. So we have kind of the whole range of things that we obviously have to work on. We do have plans for some professional development, maybe the wrong terminology, workshops for parents, how you best can help your child coordinate their day, whether it's distance learning, a hybrid schedule, even just how to help your child with just routine homework if we were back traditionally someday. So we have a wide variety of things like that. We have focused people in Title I schools that their sole responsibility is to work directly with parents, to advocate for children, to support children in a variety of ways. So we would marshal our resources there. Again, if it's the board's desire that we are distance learning from the first day, we will really channel our resources right now in creating the best first day out of the gate of distance learning for as many possible students as we can get involved on that first day of school, and then work hard for the remainder of the year to keep them involved throughout the year. I mean, it's going to be a constant encouragement to keep many of our children involved, I'm sure. But we have the resources and the staff and the heart and passion, I believe, to try to do our very best to accomplish that.
I'd like to say at this time that I agree with Mr. Gesford. There's so much uncertainty that surrounds this virus and so much that we just don't know. In conversations with teachers, current teachers and retired teachers, I know that teachers want to go back to school. I've heard that kids want to go back to school. But I really believe that what they want is to go back to what was, and what was no longer exists. And what was is gone now, and so what we have are restrictions and constraints. We just don't know. There's so much uncertainty surrounding our ability to keep our students safe and physically and emotionally well. I know distance learning will be difficult. It was for us. We have referred to what happened this spring as crisis distance learning. Without question, it will be hard. But I know that we can do hard things. And I have faith in this board and this superintendent that we will do everything in our power to provide equitable access to services and the best possible virtual instruction that we can. I've heard people talk about the devastating effect that not going back to school will have on our students, on their learning. And we're going to have to find a way to catch up on learning that was lost. But I truly believe that if we were to send our students back now under the conditions that we would have to, with such restrictions and constraints, mask wearing, cleaning all the time, social distancing, not being able to share materials, it will be totally different from what they have experienced as a learning environment in the past. I worry about the fear, the stress, and the anxiety that this would be causing our students. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking about and considering, and so I will be voting in favor of the motion. Is there any further discussion, any further comments?
Hello, this is Mr. Bokum, student rep. I would like to personally discuss, I've had many conversations with different students and different teachers on the reopening, and I believe with all the other plans, there's too many holes and gaps and ethical, legal concerns. So I believe the best course of motion is to follow a virtual, all virtual learning system with improvements from what we had in spring. I know many students, they fell behind, they grew apathy for school. I believe through some much needed improvements, we can make virtual learning more suitable for our whole entire population of students and faculty.
Thank you, Mr. Bokum. Anyone else? Anyone else? All right, then I'm going to read again the motion, and then Dr. Pugh will call the roll for the vote. The motion is, based on the continuing COVID-19 pandemic and the serious health risks associated with said pandemic, and for the safety of all WCPS students and staff, I move to adopt a model of full distance learning for WCPS beginning August 31st, 2020, and continuing until it is safe for students to physically return to school, and to authorize the superintendent to develop and implement the operational plans necessary to support this model. Dr. Pugh, would you call the roll, please, for the vote?
Yes, Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bokum.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. The motion carries unanimously with the student member concurring. Okay, at this time, we'll move to the superintendent's report and update. Dr. Michael?
Thank you, President Williams. First of all, I'd like to begin by welcoming Kevin to his, his first official meeting. We've always appreciated the student voice as being part of our board meetings for many, many years. And I know Kevin's going to do a great job. I got a chance to know Chris over the last 2 years, and I look forward, Kevin, to having the opportunity to know you a lot better here in the future. So welcome. I did want to, board members and community, I do want to begin by thanking a tremendous number of people that are working on our reopening plan. And even with the board's vote tonight, we'll focus more on our distance learning plan, but we also will continue with a variety of other portions of the plan. We'll have to continue with the possibility of needing, our packets for those that can't get access to the internet at all. We're going to continue with the potential of a hybrid model in the event that we come back in some type of phase back in model at some point in the year, hopefully, or hopefully it doesn't go all the way till next year, but at this point, who knows? And every combination thereof, distance learning and in-person learning, and even back hopefully someday to full traditional learning. But we've had a tremendous number of people. I think at this point we have over 200 teachers that are working on curriculum and the best way to deliver curriculum in a variety of fashions. I want to thank them. Very grateful for all our parents who filled out surveys. All of our teachers have filled out surveys back in June. When those were provided, we've had a lot of feedback. Administrators have provided feedback across the county. I particularly want to thank Jeff Prue, Dr. Pugh, Dr. Willow, Sarah Stair, many others that are chairing some of these committees and subcommittees. Again, just a lot of work is going into trying to determine the very best way to teach our children. I do want to share with the community, Mrs. Williams, to your point, what we did in the spring was kind of a crisis distance learning, we really called it our continuity of learning plan. We wanted to maintain our students in academic studies as well as their encore and elective studies during the spring. We were hopeful several times that we were going to be able to come back, and obviously that was not the case. What will happen this fall will be dramatically different. We need to start the year. We need to build relationships with our students. We need to re-engage them in the full learning process. Our pledge to you is, to the very best of our abilities, we will make third grade a true third grade experience. To the very best of our abilities, sixth grade math will be sixth grade math. Ninth grade English and so on will be the full experience of being in class and having that knowledge, most essential knowledge, to move a child forward and prepare for the rest of their life. Many people believe if we're out for a short period of time or even out for the whole year that students will quickly recover. That is not what research is indicating, and it's going to be very, very important that we do an excellent job. And to do an excellent job with distance learning or hybrid or a phase back into school at some point will require our entire community to work together. So our community leaders, the Board of Education, our staff, our parents, and obviously our students we'll need to work together to make that all work. Our work groups have been working on curriculum standards, again, really focusing on each grade level. What are those essential pieces? We might not teach all of third grade, but we will teach the most essential pieces for a child to be ready and prepared to move on to fourth grade and so on. What are those emotional, mental status of our children, and how do we help support their well-being? We'll obviously provide different types of schedules and samples of schedules as we roll out our plan on August 4th. The state is requiring us to track attendance, which we did not have to do in the spring. So quite obviously attendance will be important from a parent standpoint, students, and our staff. We obviously want student attendance to be very high and want our students to participate. There'll be a substantial amount of professional development for staff. Quite obviously now we know to focus on distance learning for our new teachers coming in, and even for teachers that experience crisis distance learning, there's still much to learn. And we're preparing that type of material as we move forward here for the rest of the summer. Huge technology investments been made with the CARES money that we received. We'll have new iPads, new Chromebooks that'll be replacing outdated devices. Much of that won't phase in probably until mid-September, mid-October. We will start the year with devices that are in good order, and we'll provide those, and we will provide eventually to pre-K through 12th grade. Every student will be provided a device that needs a device. I do think this is a great opportunity for home and hospitalization teaching. In the past, we've often done that with 6 hours of instruction coming from someone who visits the home. I think what we'll learn and grow out of distance learning will be the opportunity for some of those children someday to join their classmates, the equivalent of live from home, if they're able, but just not able to attend school, and or for us to provide distance learning directly to them in their home and hospitalization designation. Again, I want to appreciate the staff. We've done a lot of logistics. Again, while we might not need them for August 31st, we will need them sometime when we return. So a great deal of work has gone into preparing. We already have on hand thousands of bottles of hand sanitizer, more than we have in the past. I mentioned earlier our 420 thermometers. We have hundreds of thousands of dozens of gloves, N95 masks in the few cases that we'd have to have those available to staff, disposable masks, thousands of those, disposable pediatric masks, which would be the type of mask that a young child would wear, clear face shields, gowns, shoe coverings, all those types of things we do have available now. So in the event we return to school where staff need those devices, and many of those are being used today, and I saw those being used at E. Russell Hicks in Lincolnshire today. So a lot of preparations going into whatever this year is going to bring. On August 4th, we intend to bring the board a more formalized plan. I'll be able to answer some of the board members' questions more specifically, again, with a team of people. I think we've dedicated a great deal of time to the business meeting to share our plan. Again, like Mrs. Williams, I want to thank parents and families and teachers and people that have emailed us over the last, well, actually since March. I've tried to personally respond to as many of those as possible. I know a number of emails that we received today were directed directly to the board, and I don't even know if the board members have had time to read the majority of those emails at this point, but I am concerned about our children. We will do the very best we can. We all need to work together to continue to combat COVID-19, and obviously that takes a great deal of cooperation, including the school system. I know this is going to be challenging for teachers, challenging for students, challenging for parents to deal with childcare issues, also the learning, things that many teachers or parents didn't sign on to be the main teacher, but we will work with you. Again, we'll have parent workshops that help in many ways. We hope to provide a homework hotline, some various things like that with our distance learning platform. So a lot more to come. And August 4th will really just be the beginning. I anticipate that throughout the year, we'll continue to make adjustments as needed to meet the needs of our students. So again, I just want to thank everybody that's been involved. I understand and appreciate the board's decision tonight. We will use this as an opportunity to focus on what's going to happen, at least for the beginning of the school year. And Mrs. Williams, with that, I think that ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Okay, next on our agenda is personnel action. Dr. Pugh.
Good evening, Mrs. Williams, Dr. Michael, and board members. As discussed earlier in closed session, there are several staff changes for your review. At this time, I'll ask for your approval of today's personnel actions.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Is there a motion?
Madam President, typically I would make the motion here, but since I would have to vote again, I'm voting against it, I would ask someone to step in and make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a motion?
Madam President, this is Mrs. Murray. I ask you, sorry. I move that we accept the personnel actions for this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Bedford seconds.
Okay, Mr. Stauffer, I heard you first, so I'll accept your second. So the motion is to accept the personnel actions as discussed earlier this afternoon. All those in favor, Dr. Pugh, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesper,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
No.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bokum.
Thank you. Mr. Bokum doesn't vote on personnel, Dr. Pugh?
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. So by a vote of 6 affirmative votes, 1 no vote, the motion carried. Personnel action is approved. Okay, we'll move to reports to the board. I know committees have not been meeting, but are there any committee chairs that would like to comment or make a report?
Mr.
Mrs.
Bickford?
Williams, this is Mrs. Murray. Sorry, Mr. Bickford, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I just wanted to report that Finance Committee will be meeting on Teams. It will be a public meeting. That'll be on the 28th of this month at 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Mrs. Murray, go ahead.
Yes, Curriculum and Instruction will be having a virtual meeting on Tuesday, July 21st at 4 p.m. to discuss global community citizenship and what that will look like in Washington County Public Schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move then to miscellaneous business. Future agenda items. You should have received in your packet a list of future agenda items. We have quite a few listed. Colleagues, if you have any suggestions for agenda items, please let a member of the Agenda Planning Committee know so that we can consider that item and have it placed appropriately on an upcoming meeting's agenda. So at this time, we'll move to board member comments. Mr. Bickford, let's go alphabetically. Would you like to begin?
Sure. I'd like to welcome our new student representative. I'm actually familiar with Mr. Bokum because he serves on the Hagerstown Youth Council. And an excellent member of that. And if he serves us as well as he served them, we're in very good hands.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Mrs. Fisher.
I have no comments for this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Gaspard.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. I do have a couple of thank yous I need to relay. The first one, I have to say, we have to thank our superintendent for the guidance and his unwavering dedication to his staff, to the students, to Washington County. I read the emails that come in, and he is actually attempting to address every one of them, and it's probably hundreds of emails that come in, and that takes a lot of time. I know his day starts early and it ends very late, but he is very dedicated, and I just want to thank the superintendent, Dr. Michaels, for your dedication. And I can only say, my prayers go out to you and the decisions you have to make, and I hope that it doesn't all weigh on you at all at one time. I know your staff has been unwavering, and I'm very thankful for them, along with our president, who also, Mrs. Williams, who definitely works very hard and keeping our board members, all of us, informed of what's going on during all this time. And being on the board for quite a few years now, it's been a lot, and I do want to thank you. Moving on to parents and grandparents, students, thanks for all the emails that you have given us board members. It has been, we take every one of them very serious. We can't address every one of you like we would like to because we speak as a board. And so I do thank the ones that I was able to call and speak to and chat with. And it's very important that you guys continue to be involved in this process. And welcome, Kevin. I'm glad Kevin's on the board with us, and I'm really looking forward to him being a part of this. As we had Chris was here last year, a great young man, aspiring to go out in the world and really set himself apart. We look forward to seeing Kevin grow in this role too. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Gessford. Mrs. Murray.
Well, I would just like to say it's getting late, so I'd just like to say I'm going to echo everything that Mr. Gessford said. Thank you to the superintendent and his staff. Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Thank you to the parents, the students, and the teachers that I have spoken with and have really had some good conversations. And welcome to our student member. We are so happy to have you. So that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Mr. Ridenhour.
Nothing this time, Ms. Williams. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Mr. Stauffer.
Yes, just want to welcome our student member and just want to say saddle up. It's going to be quite a ride.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Kevin, would you like to make some remarks? I realize that in going alphabetically, I should have called on you after Mr. Bickford, and I did not do that. Would you like to offer any comments?
Yes, I'd love to. I'd like to thank all board members and superintendent for being so welcoming of me as the next student member of the Board of Education here in Washington County. And also like to thank the board and superintendent for being so appreciative and listening to the student voice. And also I would like to thank all the parents, teachers, staff, students for all of the emails, all of the questions, all the concerns, and all the feedback they gave for their opinions on reopening and various other topics.
Thank you. I too echo Mr. Gessford's remarks. And to that, I would like to add to our community. To help get our kids back to school, I encourage all of you, each and every one of you, to wear masks in public, social distance, and please wash your hands. Dr. Michael, do you have any closing remarks?
I don't think I have anything further this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, if there are no further comments from any of our members, we'll adjourn.